morning, Ms. Norman. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Mr. Chairperson. Mr. Chairperson, may I just, unfortunately, by the time I wanted to draw the registrar's attention, I see that she's got 3 files before the Chairperson. There's supposed to be 2 files, only U7 and U8. It would be file 7, it would be U6A, and then file 8.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you. And then, if I may just, in the U6A, the Chairperson would recall that that also contains Mr. Pilay's statement, but those who arrange bundles now, formally, have decided to place the statement of Mr. Shweni. It will be marked U7 inside. It's marked, there is a divider, Mr. Chairperson, inside that one, part 1.
We must just make sure that there is no confusion.
Yes.
Last week, when this lever arch file that I'm holding was handed up,
Yes.
I don't know whether it was you or one of your colleagues, I thought she said it should be marked Exhibit U8, but she subsequently said, no, it's UA.
That was me, Mr. Chairman.
Now you're talking about U7.
Yes.
You're not talking about alphabet, so I don't know.
No, in U6A, Mr. Chairman, if you turn inside that, there is a divider.
In U?
U6A, the one that you're holding.
You see now, I've got here Exhibit UA, so, but you're saying U6A.
Yes, that is how...
so there is more confusion.
In fact, Mr. Chairman, we'll mark it for the Chairperson. I should have done that, but what we conveyed last week was that it would be U6A, not just A.
Well, I suppose that when I thought I was told Exhibit U8, I didn't hear U68.
Oh.
And when it was changed to Exhibit UA, I didn't hear Exhibit U6A.
I think maybe it's the way we conveyed it, Mr. Chairperson,
So,
but we'll mark it properly for you.
Yeah, but I mean, even this, so the exhibit part must be done. So let's go back now.
Yes.
So this should be Exhibit U6A.
That is correct, yes.
And I have a suspicion that the transcript
Will not have that.
will not be referring to, in terms of last week, when we were all speaking. I doubt that anybody was speaking about Exhibit U6A, because then I would have picked it up to say, what are we talking about now?
Yes. No, I'll make sure that I call up the transcript and rectify that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
So it's U6A.
Yes. And then in that file, then Mr. Chairperson, if you page through that file,
Well,
there's
maybe let's finish first.
All right.
What should...
Then what follows...
And then there is 7, file 7, in regard to that one. File 7 off. Is that in order? That Exhibit U6A,
yes,
is written volume U,
yes,
and then file 7 off.
yes, that is in order. And
That's
then,
in order.
Thank you. And then below that, it would have Andre Pillay, and then it will have Shweni.
Well, it doesn't have Shweni.
It simply says Andre Pillay.
And it's got Andre Pillay, and below that sub.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Then we'll correct that during the tea break, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, just make sure that what I have is exactly the same as what you have,
Yes.
and what the witness has is exactly the same as what we
all
both have.
Thank you.
And then there is the file 8, volume U5, file 8.
That's correct.
What should that be?
This should be, because we have U7, and then this will also is, if the Chairperson pages through, the very first page in that file has got volume U7, part 2. Does it have the volume U7?
Yeah, it has that.
Yes. And then it will say part 2.
Yes.
That's correct.
Yeah. So that one is exhibit U6 and then it's A.
Yes.
This one should be exhibit U7.
Yes, let's make this one exhibit U7, Ms. Chairperson, please.
Any alphabet to go with it or not?
No alphabet.
Okay, I've got that. It doesn't, on the spine, it doesn't tell me whose statements
statement
are
it is.
inside.
I will correct that, Mr. Chairperson.
Okay.
Because all these were done, I don't know, they must have picked up an extra bundle.
Yeah.
Yes.
Then obviously the next one, exhibit U9, it seems.
No, that's a different,
If that will be done on the spine as well,
yes.
before we have to use it.
Thank you. We'll
Okay.
attend to them during the tea break, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Today we're calling another witness, and his name is Sincedile Ebenezer Shweni. He is present. May he be sworn in, please.
Okay, thank you. Registrar, do that.
Please state your full names for the record.
My name is Entail, Ebenezer Shweni.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
No, I don't.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes.
Do you swear that the evidence that you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Shweni, you have two lever arch files in front of you.
Yes.
The one is marked volume U, A file 7. Do you see that?
Yes, Chair.
And if you open that file,
Well, do you want to make sure first that it's marked the way it should be marked, all the files he has, and in particular talk about what exhibits
Yes.
they are as opposed to whatever else?
is there. If you turn over that file, please, you will see, do you see that it's written volume U, and then in brackets says 6A?
No, it's written volume U,
Yes?
file 7 off.
There's no 6A.
There's no 6A.
Miss, can I just ask that it's been marked 6A? Okay.
maybe you tell me the page.
It starts with the first page, but just after the orange divider, Mr. Chairperson.
Well, the orange divider is not at the beginning, and there are it looks like there are quite a few orange dividers. If you tell me the page where it starts, that will be easier.
No, it will start with page 1.
Page,
There will be an index after that.
Is it not paginated? The whole bundle is not paginated?
No, Mr. Chairperson, because if you recall, this is partly the bundle that has Mr. Pilay's supplementary statement.
Yeah, but each bundle must be paginated throughout so that it's easier. Because if you tell me, if you have got a pagination for the whole bundle and you tell me what page,
Yes.
then it's easier than if I'm looking for the page of a particular statement.
Where you come across the index when you page through, Mr. Chairperson, there's a divider and then it's followed by an index and then a statement. It will not be in the beginning because that contains Mr. Pilay's. Might I assist,
Did you
Mr.
say
Chairperson?
Exhibit U6A?
That is correct, yes.
The one that has got Andre Pilay's supplementary statement on the
Yes,
spine?
yes.
Okay, and then there is an index at the beginning.
No, that is not the index that you are referring to this morning, Mr. Chairperson.
Where is
please.
the index that you are referring to?
It will be in the middle. May I assist, Mr. Chairperson, if I could just be handed up your file, just to
Well, I
page.
just want to check because it's not going to help if each time you have to assist me.
Yes.
I see, for example, that this liver art file has got, at least in regard to some pages, AFP 539. Is that not
No.
pagination that goes right through?
No, it doesn't go right through, Mr. Chairperson, because what they've done, they've put in this witness's evidence in the same bundle, but as marked as U7.
Okay, I think I've got it, but you talked about an orange
Yes.
divider. Is this the one you called orange?
It looks orange to me. Yes. Is that used
I don't
on
think I've
color
seen,
blind?
I don't think I've seen an orange this color.
That's the one, Mr. But it should be marked U7.
Okay, I've found it.
Thank you. And then there's an index and then followed by a statement. Has the chairperson found it? I'd like the witness to just identify the statement.
Found where the statement is. I found the statement.
Thank you, thank
I don't
you.
know about the index, but
Yes.
that's what we want,
Thank you very
statement.
much. Yes. Thank you. May I just...
This is not a statement in the bundle that I used to prepare. The one I used may have notes that I had made. So arrangements might have to be made
To replace
I
that.
get the one which might have my notes.
We'll do that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Shweni. If you you've seen your statement. You found it?
Yes.
Could you look at page 28 of that statement?
Page 28, I don't have page 28. Oh, on the top, yes.
Yes.
SES 028.
That's correct. It will,
Yes.
Yeah, those are the page numbers.
Okay,
It will be
sorry.
SCS, yes,
Okay.
028. Do you see there's a declaration and there's a signature of a deponent? Is that your signature?
It is my signature,
And you
Chair.
signed that on the 15th of February 2019.
That is correct, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Do you regard the contents of the statement true and correct?
Yes.
You made the statement voluntarily?
Yes, I made the statement voluntarily.
Thank you. And then if you take the next bundle, which is Exhibit U7, just to identify your statement there, if I may direct the chairperson to go to page 645 of that bundle.
Page number?
Page 645. Have you found it?
Yes, Chair.
Oh, sorry. Is the chairperson found the page 645?
Yes, but why are you keeping these, the main statement and the supplemental statement in two different bundles?
Mr. Chairperson, we have a new section that does bundles, and they've got a system that they've created which they have explained to us. In fact, the Chairperson will find that these, in fact, if you page through that volume, you will realize that it's a continuation of the annex charge to the main statement. So the question is, then the supplementary follows the very last annex charge to the main statement. Then the supplementary was received after that. Then it followed that sequence.
Yeah, but it's much better that the supplementary statement should come immediately after the main statement, because they must be read together, isn't it?
The only difficulty with that, Mr. Chairperson, is that then the annexures will have to follow the supplementary, even if they are annexures to the main statement.
Well, if need be, you can then make another copy to come immediately after the main statement. It creates duplication, but that's better rather than read the
Then
main
having to
statement
page.
in one bundle and go and look for the supplementary statement in another bundle.
We'll do that
But
then.
whoever is preparing these things, they are subject to you, the evidence leaders, because you must know, you must decide how best to present the evidence. And if their way doesn't agree with your way must prevail.
Unfortunately, Mr. Chairperson, it agreed with my way, but now that the chairperson has pointed, if it doesn't agree with the chairperson, then we'll change it. But it is how I had asked them to prepare it, and so that the main statement is followed by all of its annexures, and then the supplementary follows that, and with its annexures.
Yeah.
Yes, but if it is not convenient to the chairperson, we'll change it.
It may be that we must also talk in due course about other aspects of how some of these recent bundles have been
Created.
put together, the sequence of documents. Sometimes a document that's supposed to be at the beginning you find right in the middle.
Yes.
And so we might have to talk about that.
Thank you.
But that's fine for now. Okay, let's proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Shweni, at page 645, there is a statement that goes up to page, I'll give you this page, sorry, without the annexures, that goes up to page 656. Could you turn to page 656?
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Is that your statement?
Yes, it is.
Is that your signature appearing at page 656?
Yes, it is.
Are the contents of the statement true and correct?
They are.
And is that did you actually depose to that statement on the 26th of February 2019?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And did you make this statement, the supplementary statement, voluntarily?
Yes, I did.
Thank you.
Mr. Mshweni, you might have to raise your voice a bit, and don't be too far from the mic.
Okay.
Okay, all right. So
Thank
that everyone can hear you in the room.
I'll do so, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could we then go back to Exhibit 6A? You can put aside the bundle that's got your supplementary statement. We're going to the U6A. Thank you. For the record, Mr. Shweni, you'll be opening the statement that's got U7 in the middle. Is that the one? The main statement, U7.
Yes, mine is at the beginning, Chair.
No, that's the wrong file. I said that's the supplement, that you are opening the part 2 of the statement.
No, I'm in
Oh,
part one.
Oh, part one, okay,
Yeah, page SES 002.
all right.
Okay.
Thank you. Now, could you just for the record, place on record your qualifications, please?
I have a BCom degree in accounting and a postgraduate diploma in accounting. I qualified as a chartered accountant in South Africa.
When did you qualify as a chartered accountant?
I wrote my exam in 1995 and then did my articles, and I fully qualified in 1998.
Okay. And where I understand you are now, it's common cause that you're employed by ESCOM, am I correct?
Since 2001, yes, I have been.
And how did you rise within the ranks of ESCOM?
Well, I started in 2001 as a senior financial analyst working in the generation department, generation finance in the generation division. I stayed there for 3 years, and then there was an opportunity for a promotion at the ESCOM Treasury Department, and I joined them in 2004. And I was seconded for a year outside of Treasury Department to Project Development Department. When I returned, and then I was promoted to a corporate specialist after that year and a half of secondment. So since then, I've been a corporate specialist.
Okay. What do your duties entail as a corporate specialist?
My duties entail putting together and compilation of the corporate, of the financial funding plan, which forms part of the corporate plan. Mainly once that is compiled, engage with the lenders to raise financing for the organization from different sources of financing, export credit agencies, development financing institutions. And then from time to time, we do interact with the lender community. So, but in the main, it is to raise funding for ESCOM.
Yes. You are familiar with what is referred to as the Huarong transaction, am I correct?
Yes, I am familiar, Chair.
Yes. Could you just, in the first page of your statement, you mentioned the persons that you dealt with insofar as this transaction is concerned?
Yes, Chair.
Yes. Could you just mention the persons and their positions?
And the first person I mentioned is Mr. Anuj Singh, who was the then Chief Financial Officer, and his role in the transaction, he was a signatory of the term sheets. And Mr. Khalib Kasim, who's the current Chief Financial Officer, he's a signatory to the 2 board submissions and also took part in the short-term financing discussions. I also mentioned all board members, including Dr. Pat Naidu, the chair of the IFC, and the new board members who were involved when I presented, and we had discussions on the transaction. Fourth person I mentioned is Mr. Andre Pillay, who was the initial key point in Treasury for Warong, who's the current treasurer at the moment. The next person is Ms. Khatli Sohoitse Modimo. She was involved in the procurement process that featured Warong, both the RFI and RFP, request for information and request for proposal. I mentioned number 6, Mr. Pubi Gavenda, who was the general manager in special projects. He was involved in the project or asset development aspect of the transaction. Next is Ms. Gabriela Palacios Flask, who was the legal advisor, but she joined in the transaction much later. She's got a construction contract expertise. Second, before last, is Ms. Lerato Machinini, who is our investor relations manager at Treasury. She was involved in arranging the meetings and the trip, mainly the trip to China. Last one is Ms. Itabeleng Hlapoloza, who's the member of the team. She assisted in putting together one memorandum.
Yes, thank you. And could you briefly, Mr. Andre Pillay did testify on Friday, as you may be aware, and he gave the chairperson the background as to how they met representatives of Huarong. Could you just tell the chairperson about your first interaction with the representatives of Tribus and Huarong?
Yes, Chair, the meeting was arranged for around about 1st of June 2016. Attended the meeting. There were quite a number of people that were invited to the meeting. Some of them couldn't make it, so I ended up with Mr. Rajiv Thomas, who was the CEO of Tribus. So we had a brief discussion. He explained the concept to me, and then I gave the feedback to Andre. That was succeeded by a meeting with all the parties that were invited in the previous meeting, except for Ms. Judy Raphael, attending the meeting where Mr. Rajiv Thomas, on the flip chart, demonstrated the concept. The people that were present in that second meeting was Mr. Andre Pillay himself, myself, Mr. Pubi Govender, which I mentioned, a gentleman by the name of Prish Govender, who was the general manager in project development, and he came along with his colleague Vem Teplanch.
So how was this concept received? At that point, I understand these are initial stages of the concept or the proposal, but how was it received by the ESCOM team?
Well, it's something that we never did at the Treasury, but the colleagues in the room, Mr. Prish and Mr. Pubi Govender, they seem to be au fait. So it was going to be the first of its kind that we were dealing with. So we had to get our hands around it. But it was well received that this is something that we could look into and pursue and follow certain processes.
Yes. At that time, you reported to Mr. Andre Pillay, and I believe you still report to him. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
Thank you. Now, then the meeting, the concept is put to you as ESCOM,
Yes.
and then thereafter you deal with the process of unsolicited proposals, because Mr. Andre Pillay told us that it was an unsolicited proposal, and then you deal with the process that ESCOM has in its policy as to how these are to be handled.
Yes.
Yes. Could you just briefly tell Chairperson go through the process?
Yes, that's correct, Chair. We treated this as an unsolicited proposal, and we've got a document that guides us, but we'll get into that document at a much later stage because it's in the supplementary. But at a high level, the process is as follows. Whoever comes with the unsolicited proposal meets one of the Treasury representatives. And usually, and in most cases, Andre is part of that initial discussion. So he will rope in whoever he feels should also be part of the conversations. And then we had discussions, and the next step in the process would be to do some vetting or verification of the entity, especially if the entity is fairly new, like Huarong. And I make a statement that myself, White and Case, we did the high-level verification, but it happened at the various stages of the process. But ideally, that high level should happen right at the beginning. And then the counterpart will give us a term sheet, which we will evaluate. If there's a requirement for us to exchange some information, we will protect confidentiality of our information by getting into a non-disclosure agreement with that counterparty. In this instance, I don't think at that stage we were going to share non-public information, so there was no need to share that. Then the proposal, if it's palatable to the needs and requirements of Treasury, then we would take it either through an open tender process, which we call a request for proposals, or if it is a bespoke transaction which we feel that it's this and counterparty is the only party that will give us this solution. The procedure or the practice note allows us not to go the RFP route. However, the recent National Treasury regulations require that if we go that route, meaning we don't go the open tender, then we'll have to write a motivation to the National Treasury of a sole source and say, motivate why this is the only entity that's giving us this solution. However, with respect to wrong, although they mentioned that their proposal was bespoke, we decided to err on the cautious side, so we went the RFP route. Once the RFP is evaluated by the team, and the procedure states how the team should evaluate what it should look for, declarations of interest and all those things, and the proposal is acceptable by the team, then it needs to go to what we call Treasury Assets and Liabilities Committee. It is a committee made up of the heads of various sections of the Treasury. They also allow some attendees in the committee to participate, but decisions are made by the members. It is discussed there and it's approved for recommendation to the CFO. In this instance, this proposal did not go to the ALCO, so it did not fulfill that requirement. So once ALCO...
Before you deal with that,
Okay.
do you, maybe so that you don't have to come back to it,
Yes.
do you know of the reasons why it was never referred to ALCO?
I don't know, Chair, but what I know is that this was overtaken by events, and the event being the chair of ALCO at the time, which is Mr. Anoj Singh, told Andre that they need to submit the proposal to the higher committee than ALCO, which is Board Investment and Finance Committee. So that nullifies, once the proposal or solution goes to the high level committees, so it nullifies the need to go to ALCO. And he also, maybe I'm jumping the gun here, the proposal was also, in terms of how it was presented as a term sheet, it was also signed. So if a chairperson of ALCO or the CFO puts his signature in a document that was supposed to have been discussed at the lower level committees, in my mind, it nullifies the requirement for it to go to ALCO.
Yes.
When you refer to Andre, you're referring to Mr. Andre Pillay.
Mr. Andre Pillay, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Because I report directly to him.
Yes, thank you. Then you were going through the process, yes?
Yes, and
If
then
he had gone
if
to
it had
ALCO?
gone to ALCO, would write a memorandum to CFO, and then CFO would consider the memorandum and approve and recommend for, if it needs to go to high-level committees like the board IFC, then he would append his signature to that, and then it goes to that committee.
Yes. Yes, you
So
continue,
in
yes.
5.8, in 5.7, I do make mention of the fact that by pure chance, the memo was prepared because we're preparing a memo for the signing of the term sheet in December. And I prepared the memo, and it had a recommendation that it needs to go to board.
Yes.
So that's how it sort of fulfilled that requirement for the CFO to be informed and to look at the proposal and see whether he recommends for higher level approval.
Yes. And now we haven't reached that point where we are going to deal with the actual proposal.
Yes.
But the fact that ALCO then that step was jumped, has that had any impact, negative or positive, to the handling of the process as a whole? of the proposal as a whole?
In my mind, yes, Chair. ALCO is quite they've got a very rigorous process of interrogating proposals. Because of the elements that were in this proposal, first of all, it was new, and maybe the terms and conditions of that proposal, not maybe they quite onerous. They would have had several interactions and iterations of interrogating the proposal, and perhaps it would not have gone through ALCO.
So
Is
now-
I'm sorry,
I beg
is
your
it
pardon.
normal for a proposal to go to a higher level, like the CFO you were talking about, without going through that committee?
In the Treasury environment, it's not normal that we do things that way.
Yes, and would your expectation be that if it went to the CFO, if a proposal that had been unsolicited, if it went to the CFO without going through that stage, the CFO should return it to that committee? Is that what you would expect?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, yes, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And at this point, when Mr. Anuj Singh said, look, this must go to IFC, did he advance, according to your knowledge, any reasons why that step was going to be jumped?
I don't have any knowledge of that, Chair.
Yes, thank you. And then you have annexed most of the annexures from, if I may, just to complete this picture. If, for example, you go to annexure SS1, it's just where you deal with the correspondence, arranging the meetings. Am I correct?
That's correct, Chair.
You've referred to it in the earlier paragraphs. And then SS2 is the same, but then SS3 is the white and case email,
Yes.
which we had raised and referred to extensively on Friday with Mr. Andre Pillay,
Yes,
because he had annexed it to his papers.
Yes.
With the leave of the chairperson, we will not deal with that. But just briefly, because you've dealt with it at this early stage of your evidence, what was the input of that memo from White and Case?
The input of that memo at high level, they're highlighting some structural questions in terms of how these entities were wrong, what we need to interrogate in terms of these entities. So it deals with that verification, so that once we interrogate those, the structure of wrong and its parent company, which they in their proposal they are highlighting quite extensively, then it would be able to give us who is who in the whole structure of the group.
Yes, and were they at that early stage, that is March, around
Yes.
March 2017?
Yes.
Were they recommending that this is a structure, that this is something that you must go along with, sign if you have to sign?
No, in actual fact, in this email, they're making reference to the meeting that happened, but their actual recommendation is that at this stage, because there's no clarity in terms of who this entity is, we should not sign the term sheet.
Yes. And then,
Just before you
Sorry.
proceed,
Yes, Senor.
when you were explaining the various steps in the process which are followed when there is an unsolicited proposal, I understood you to say that a term sheet would come in at some stage. Now, I just want to confirm that that's what you were saying, that's what you said in relation to what is normal procedure.
Yes, Chair, it is normal.
Yes,
After the proposal has been
Yes.
sketched to us,
Yes.
the expectation is that we'd get a term sheet.
yes. Well, I may have misunderstood Mr. Pillay. I thought he was saying, a term sheet is not part of what is the usual process. maybe he meant the specific terms in the specific term sheet that was used in regard to Warong. Maybe were not usual, but you say it's normal to have a term sheet.
Yes, it is normal to have a
Yes.
term sheet. For us to proceed
Yes.
to engaging the lender or
Yes.
the proposed lender,
Yes.
we need to have the term sheet which sets the
Yeah.
tone and the basis of our discussion.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If my recollection was that he was saying the signing of the term sheet is what was not normal.
Or the signing,
signing
but,
of the term
but the
sheet.
term sheet
But
would
it-
be
it
part
is-
of, yeah,
Yes,
but it
that-
wouldn't be signed.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
Yes,
all
thank
right.
you.
Would you
Maybe-
confirm that, Mr. Shweni?
Yes, I can confirm in my 10 years or so of doing
Yeah.
funding execution,
Yeah,
I've never
you don't
signed,
sign a term
never
sheet.
signed a term
Yeah.
sheet, yes.
Okay, so
Thank you.
that is what was unusual, he
Yes,
said.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then you also, in paragraph 5.2, you don't have to go back, that's when you're dealing with the process, you have attached a memo and the emails that you received. If you could turn to page 37, that is SS4,
Yes, Chair?
and then that appears at page 38.
Yes, Chair.
And then there's an email there from Butse Sikwichi
Yes.
to you.
Yes, Chair.
That email is, I find it to be quite important in line with your evidence. If you could just read the summary and the conclusions. First, tell us who was Butse Sikwichi.
Butse Sikwichi, if you see there on the addressees, Chair, there's a person named Beke Moloi. Beke Moloi.
Yes.
Yes. Beke Moloi is the one I contacted initially. She worked in the business intelligence section of the business. I approached her when we were faced with a number of entities that were cropping up in the wrong structure, requesting her to do some verification checks. So she asked Botse Sikwichi. So Botse was a colleague or is a colleague of Beke Moloi.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Could you just tell the chairperson what were their findings then?
So should I read the summary?
Yes, the summary, yes.
So the summary and conclusion reads as follows. The information found could not establish a link between China Orong Asset Management Company to Orong Investment Company Limited and IDEVA International Group. The second point is there is no information available in the public domain about IDEVA International Group Limited. Third point is Jian Bao Chen is the only director and shareholder. As indicated in the email from Kahimbara Lisa of Norton Rose, Fulbright, South Africa, responding to email from Matthew Richard of White and Case. Next point is he is the joint chairman and joint chief executive officer of another company called Sino Energy and International Holdings Group Limited. Next point is Mr. Chen has been managing director of Beijing IDEVA Energy Management Company Limited since 2001/2003.
2011.
2011 and 2013.
Sorry, 2011 and 2013, apologies. Next point is no information could be found about Beijing IDEVA Energy Management Company Limited. The last point is that Mr. Chen graduated from Xi'an Politics Institute, China, where he majored in economics and management and holds a master's degree from School of Economics and Management of Tsinghua University, China. He has been a managing director of different companies. Mr. Chen has an extensive experience in corporate management. So those were the findings.
Thank you. And then, so you have these findings, and you had requested that your intelligence section investigates this part.
Yes.
Who did you convey these findings to?
I convey the findings to Andre because I reported everything that I did to him, and also to our, I think, Gabriella at the time.
Yes. And if you page through...
And also to White and Case.
Thank you. Then if you page through at page 42, still the same emails, could you just read what you convey to Mr. Moloi there?
Informally, is that where I...
Yes, that's where you start, yes.
So informally, as discussed, see constitutional doc, not convincing at all. And this is the party to which the money must be paid to. Kindly check other companies in the structure, including China Worong Asset Management Company, who is meant to be the holding company of Worong Investment Company Limited.
Yes. So then this is what triggered then their response, which you've just read.
Yes, that's what triggered their response. Because we had asked for some information through White case, and then that information was supplied to White case via their legal counsel, which is Norton Rose.
Yes, and then if you've done down that email, in fact, I've read it incorrectly in the way in which email is supposed to be read, but the one following the one that you've just read, 7 June 2017, you will see that quite a number of people are copied in the email from Mr. Richard Matthew. In other words, those people would have been alerted to these difficulties at the same time as you were informed.
At the same time or shortly before?
Or shortly before.
Yes.
Thank you. And then you also deal, if I can just go through your annexures so that you don't go back, because you've dealt with them in the early parts of your statement.
Okay.
You deal with SS5, which is also still the same emails, saying more or less the same thing.
Yes.
Yes. And you have at page 57 what is marked as SS6,
Okay.
which is the term sheet that you referred to
Yes.
in your statement.
Yes.
Mr. Pillay has referred to this term sheet yesterday, on Friday, I beg your pardon.
Yes, Chair.
On Friday, and he was taken through the key issues that were sort of a bone of contention between the ESCOM team and Warong, am I right?
Yes, Chair.
And those would appear at page 59. I just want you to confirm whether those are the issues or matters that you took issue with. Is it going to be reflected in your evidence later? Page 59, you've got paragraph 5, the facility fee
Yes, Chair.
of 1.6%. And what else did you take issue with on that page?
Cancellation fee.
Yes. And the percentage?
So for facility fees, the percentage and the period when it's going to be payable.
Yes.
We do take also on the annual commitment fee and the cancellation fee.
Yes. So those were the matters that were raised.
Yes.
Yes. Now, if you go back then to your statement, you've told us the procedure, how it had to be followed, and you've told us what was omitted, which is alcohol at this point.
Yes, Chair.
Let's then proceed and see, because you've told the chairperson that in as much as there was possibly no need to go the RFP route, you decided that we should err on the side of caution, and you embarked on that.
Yes, Chair.
Okay. Could you then just proceed then from where we left off, paragraph 5?
Yes, if you proceed to...
Before you proceed,
Yes.
you said that where as Treasury or as ESCOM, you feel that a particular unsolicited proposal comes from an entity that is the only entity that can execute it or that can do the job, you don't issue RFPs, an RFP. Now, my question is, how do you know that they are the only ones who can do that when you haven't invited other possible
we did not opt for that route because we did not know whether there's nobody out there in the market who can provide the same solution. So we decided to open it up to the market so that we don't make that mistake.
Or is the position that normally where you are not going to go the open route, you test the market in some other way first? Is that what, before you conclude that the people who have sent you the proposal are the only ones who can do that job? In other words, you have a way of testing whether there are other people out there or not. I heard you talk about testing the market. How do you test the market in that context?
Yes. Chair, and I must qualify, I'm not too au fait with some deep procurement processes.
Okay.
But a request
Okay.
for information
Yes.
would be sent in that regard. And the request for information, you would not contract out of it. And if the response from the request for information is only this requesting, so I think in the motivation that you would write to National Treasury is that I've tested the market using request for information, and this was the only respondent or person who responded, and hence I am not opening up into the market. I'll negotiate with this on a bilateral basis.
Okay, well, it may be that it's not something that you you deal with regularly in terms of procurement, as you say. It's just that I've heard it said before, and I didn't understand what harm it would cause, even if you thought that a particular entity is probably the only one that can do the job, what harm it would cause to invite anyone in the public who might be able to provide the same service. And then when there is nobody, then you say, okay, then this is the one, because it just seems to me that there might be room for wrong things when you are able to say, no, these are the only people who can do this, without allowing the public to come forward if there are people who can do the job. But as you say, it might not be something that you are able to deal with fully.
Well, Chair, the normal practice in Treasury, and we sort of the subset of the entire procurement area, is we, for any new ideas and concept, we will not contract without testing the market.
Yes.
So I was just talking from a theoretical perspective,
Yes.
that the market would be tested using the RFI.
Yes.
And if that's the route that department would follow, and there's only one respondent, perhaps they are allowed to go the sole source route, but they need a very strong motivation and approval by National Treasury as to why they are going the sole source route. But we normally err on the side of caution for new proposals to open it up to the public from a Treasury perspective.
Yeah, well, maybe you do provide an explanation. You say they would do the RFI, and that's the way of testing the market.
That's correct.
And if the responses to an RFI show that nobody is coming forward, this is the only one, then that's the basis on which you say there is no need to issue an RFP.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
And also further to add, Chair, the practice note that I referred to
Yes.
in the supplementary, it does not about the sole entity,
Yes.
but what it talks about the bespoke nature of the proposal.
Yes.
If the
Yes.
proposal is something that you cannot find anyway,
Yes.
then it allows for you to engage
Yes.
that particular entity on a bilateral basis.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Then you deal in paragraph 6 with the request for information, which you've just mentioned to the chairperson.
Yes, Chair, my involvement in that I was requested. This was run by Khatliso Modimo, and she advised me that this was issued, and she invited me to assist with the evaluation of that. And Worong was part of those that responded to the request for information.
Yes. And then, can you just take us through that process? Would it also be just like the RFP, be advertised in a newspaper? How is this RFI sent out to the public?
Yes, Chair, it would follow the similar route. Currently, we advertise in our portal and National Treasury's portal. So we compile the documents, which get signed by our Treasurer, Mr. Pillay, get approval from CFO. So we'd write a memo for the CFO to let him sign the RFP, RFI letters. Then once that's done, we get in touch with our tender office, and they advise us in terms of how to put it in the portals.
Yes. Now, let's not talk theoretically. Let's talk about this particular one. Did you see this one? Did you see that it was advertised in the portal, National Treasury portal? Did you get documentation to show you that this particular RFI was indeed issued?
No, Chair, I didn't.
You didn't?
No, because I was not involved in the issuance of that RFI.
All right. But then you are invited to a meeting on the 4th of November to
Yes,
discuss
Chair.
the evaluation.
Yes.
Did you attend the meeting?
Chair, I attended the meeting. It was a bilateral meeting between me and Ms. Modimo. My recollection.
I'm sorry. Where about in the statement are we now?
Paragraph 6, I beg your pardon, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, it's paragraph 6.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, you may proceed.
Yeah, my of the conversation that I had with Ms. Modimo was the difficulty she was encountering in the fact that we cannot contract out of the RFI. I don't know how she was informed that we could. She was in discussions with our procurement colleagues outside of Treasury to try and clarify what the processes are. So that was the main conversation around the RFI. We never got to look at the details of the proposals and what they were containing, because I think the understanding was that it was going to be a futile exercise if we do the evaluation, based on the fact that we were never going to contract out of that.
I'm not following. You are invited to an evaluation meeting?
Yes.
And what did you evaluate?
We didn't evaluate the proposals.
At all?
Not at all. Not at this stage. The proposals, we evaluated them at the RFP stage. So the conversation was around the challenges that Khatliso was experiencing with regard to this whole RFI process.
Okay. Now,
I'm sorry. Just confirm if I'm right. I'm getting the impression that what you are saying is you were invited to an evaluation, but actually you found that this was an evaluation in circumstances where there had not been an RFI, and that was wrong, but the person who had invited you may have understood it differently, and you say that's wrong because you can't contract out, as you put it, of RFI.
The title of the invitation says RFI evaluation.
Yes.
So I'm sure there's a lot of background checks and
Yes.
consultations
Yes.
that she did.
Yes.
By the time we get to the meeting, the conversation was not, this is how we're going to evaluate, but the conversation was about how we proceed, because now she's been advised or been informed that this process, this RFI process, it really does not have an evaluation that is required when we do the RFP so that we can award to anybody, because you cannot do that under the RFI process. So that was the main contention of the conversation.
We may be talking on the same of the same thing. You are saying, and you must just confirm if I'm correct, you are saying an evaluation happens after an RFP, not before an RFP, is that right?
An evaluation with the intention to award the contract, yes.
Yes.
So at RFI stage, you don't do such evaluation.
Yes, but is there any evaluation of any kind that is done at RFI stage?
There would be, Chair, because you evaluate all the proposals and see perhaps which ones you would perhaps shortlist for RFP,
Yes.
or the one that you can take for a sole source.
Yes.
that I have alluded to. So there would be an
So the difference would be the purpose.
yes, the difference is the
evaluation.
purpose.
Yes.
So the purpose for the RFI is just to give an indication
Yeah.
that who can provide what in the market in terms of the solutions that you're looking for.
Yes.
But you cannot contract
Yes.
out of that process. That is
Yes.
what Ms. Khoitse Modimo was advised,
Yes.
and that was the main discussion between the two of us.
That's what she was advised at the meeting,
No, before.
before the meeting.
So when I got to the meeting,
Yes.
so she said to Ms. Ncedile, we've got this problem.
Yes.
We've got the proposals, but we cannot contract out of them. Because I
Yes.
think in her mind, I don't know who advised her, in her mind, she thought the process for the RFI could lead us to the
Yes.
conclusion
Yes.
and the award of the contracts.
Or so your understanding is that at some stage she had understood
Yes,
that at RFI stage
yes,
you could grant a contract, so
Yes,
to
sir.
speak.
yes.
But before you got to talk to her, she had been advised differently or taken a different position. She accepted that you can't contract out at that stage.
That's my understanding.
And you simply confirmed that as well in discussion with her, that you also thought the same. That was your understanding too, that couldn't be done at that stage.
Well, I didn't know much about the RFI, Chair,
Oh,
because
okay.
I've never been involved in any
okay,
RFI.
okay,
All we do is
okay.
just RFPs.
Okay.
So I think this was the first time that we went that route.
Okay, all right. So, but in terms of what you said, the heading of the invite to this meeting had been, what she said to you, namely that this could not be done, did it mean that the meeting could not proceed really for its objective?
For what it was stated, meaning to go through the proposals
Yes.
and evaluate. In actual fact, I think the intention, normally this is what she did on the RFP.
Yes.
She invited me for the evaluation, and what we did was to source some support and ideas of how we need to run
Yes.
the evaluation, who needs
Yes.
to be part of the team.
Yes.
So I don't think the discussion at that stage
Yeah.
for the RFP was to go through the proposals, but was to
Yes.
talk about the strategy on
Oh.
how we're going to approach the evaluation.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Then following up on the Chair's questions, then what was going to become of this RFI process that ESCOM had embarked upon if there was not going to be evaluation of the process?
Well, it's more of information that you've received, but it had to be abandoned, and if the intention was to award, is to go the RFP route so that you can fulfill that objective.
And then in abandoning the process, I would take it that all those who had responded to it would be told. I just want to test, I don't know how the process works, but I would imagine you've invited people to give you information on this proposal, they've responded to you, and then you realize that, oops, we can't evaluate. So what do? Do you inform the people that, look, we've received your information, but because the process that we embarked upon doesn't enable us to contract out of the RFI, we are going to abandon it? Or how does the process work?
I could check with her, but as a matter of course, at the end of whatever process, we would write and inform the participants. In actual fact, to your point, Chair, in terms of how we're proceeding, to your point, some of the participants in the market, because I think they're fully aware of the fact that no contracting can come out of the RFI, they didn't even participate, and then they participate in the RFP because they know this is just for information.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Then let's move on. You deal with the, in paragraph 7, with SS6 and SS14, which are the term sheets, SS6 at least, from Huarong, am I right? Sorry, we can't hear you, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. You deal with that in paragraph 7.
Yes.
What was this review all about that you mentioned and that you deal with in that paragraph?
Well, Chair, when you get the term sheet, you review whether the acceptability and whether we're comfortable with the proposed terms and conditions on the term sheet. So that's the review.
Yes. And you did that with the Huarong one?
I did that with the Huarong term sheet, and I think I attached a term sheet where I've got
Yes.
my review comments.
Yes. And then at this point, ESCOM is still running with the one proposal from Huarong, am I correct?
Can you...
At this point, the only term sheet that ESCOM has is from Huarong?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so, because at various stages we do have unsolicited proposals that we evaluate.
Okay.
So it could not have been that we were running with Huarong.
Or did you review any other term sheets?
I think what Mr. Norman is talking about is in relation to this Huarong proposal.
Yes, that's correct.
That's
yes.
the only term sheet you got, namely from them. That's
Yes.
what she's talking about.
Yes, that's the only one I got from them through ANRE on the 18th.
Yes.
That's the only term sheet from them. But I thought what she was saying, Chair, with due respect, is that other than Huarong, were we busy with any other transaction?
I think what she meant is, other than Huarong, did you get a term sheet from anybody else relating to this particular issue that Huarong sought to address in the unsolicited proposal? I think that's what she
Yes,
was
thank
talking
you.
about.
So we moved away from the RFI. You're just talking in general.
No,
No.
I'm following your paragraph 7 because
Yes.
you're saying that there were meetings and you were reviewing the indicative term sheet. So the question is, the term sheet that you're referring to is the Huarong term sheet and
Yes,
no
that's
other?
it. No, that's one I'm referring to in paragraph 7.
Yes.
Is a Huarong term sheet.
Okay. Did you at any point review other term sheets from any other proposer?
In respect
In
of the same
respect of the
subject.
RFI.
Yes, in sort of the same concept that Huarong was proposing.
Not the same concept.
Yes.
No,
Thank
this
you.
was the only concept.
This was the only one?
Yes.
Thank you. So really, looking at it, Huarong would have qualified as a sole source
Sure,
in ESCOM's terms?
sure.
Okay.
Because we didn't have anything either following from the RFI and the RFP that was similar to Huarong.
And then if at this point we're already satisfied that there's no one else, this is the only term sheet that we're dealing with, why not make submissions to National Treasury and say this is the sole source and this is what we want to go with?
For the same reason that I said, Chair, that the information we got was that some of the entities, when you do the RFI, they know that there's no real outcome in terms of the award. So it will be very dangerous of us to take what we got from Orong as something that nobody else could propose. Hence, in the RFP process now, we got additional proposals, and it was mainly to play safe for us, so that we stand the test in terms of the correct process that we follow. And we could not, I don't think at this stage when we evaluated in terms of paragraph 7, we were looking in comparisons, but I was evaluating just the term sheet in its own for whether the terms and conditions that were there were acceptable, but not in relation to other proposals that we would have been reviewing at the time.
You see, this is where my difficulty is. Please correct me if I'm misunderstanding your evidence. ESCOM issues an RFI. It gets proposals, according to you, but those don't get evaluated because you can't contract out of an RFI. So ESCOM's intention then is to issue an RFP, but then already you have a review of the one term sheet belonging to the one company. I just want to understand why would that be happening, because the plan is that we are going to issue an RFP so that everyone else can put in a proposal. So why then was it decided that you must review this particular term sheet without you having at least embarked on that process that you're contemplating?
Sorry, Chair, I misunderstood your question.
Yes.
This term sheet that we reviewed was not part of the deliverables for the RFI. So the RFI process abandoned with everything including Orong. But parallel to this, then a term sheet is sent to me by Andre to review because he received the term sheet from Orong. So we did not isolate, if that's your question, from the RFI process to say, here's a term sheet now. This is a separate and independent process from the RFI.
So I take it that you would have received a completely different term sheet from the one that was submitted in the RFI process?
No. No. When they make their submissions, in all their submissions, they submit one and the same thing. Even in the RFP process, what they submitted was the signed term sheet, which was signed before yes.
So the same term sheet that was submitted in the RFI was the same one that you reviewed?
Yes, correct.
But now given to you under different circumstances?
Yes, not under the umbrella of RFI.
So what was that process called in terms of the procurement processes of ESCOM? The process now that you are embarking on of reviewing this one term sheet outside the RFI process, what is that process called?
It's the same process that I alluded to earlier, where you receive the term sheet after the engagement. So it is the process that's before the RFP.
Let's not waste time on it. I will link this up with your evidence actually going forward. Now let's then...
Before we may have spoken or we may speak at cross purposes.
Yes.
Earlier on you spoke about, you said that you can't contract out of RFI.
Correct.
Now, I think what you meant was you can't conclude a contract pursuant to an RFI process. Is that right? In other words,
just repeat that
you
again.
can't appoint a service provider as a result of only the RFI process.
That's correct.
Yes. So for some of us, when you say contract out of it means something else.
Oh.
It means exclude the RFI process. You can't exclude the RFI process. You can't exempt yourself from the RFI process. It means the RFI process is obligatory. In other words, you don't have an option to skip it. But now I've understood what you meant. You meant that you can't appoint a service provider pursuant only to the RFI process.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that. Then you deal with the contentious terms on the term sheet.
Yes, Chair.
Yes. We've already dealt with them. Do you want to talk to that paragraph quickly as to what you found to be concerning? You've already highlighted them from the one that I referred to your
Yes,
the fees.
Yes, Chair.
Yes.
The bone of contention was the fees, the term facility fee, and also the.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So-
Ms. Norman,
Miss-
you need to keep an eye on the watch.
Oh,
You know, when we don't take the break at 15:15,
it affects
it affects
Yes.
because then we must come back at 25 to, whereas it's much better to
to
adjourn
skip
at
the time.
15:15 and resume at 15:30.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll ask him.
I'm sorry, Mr. Shweni. We'll have to take the adjournment now. We will resume at 11:30.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We adjourn.
not that they were not as important as this one, focus became this upfront facility fee. And I also say in the paragraph that there were interactions and Mr. Pubi Govender, who I mentioned what his position was, played a very important or very active, not important part in explaining some of these fee levels in his own understanding and background.
You make a distinction that this was not simply a pure financing transaction.
Yes.
And how was it different from what you usually deal with within Eskom?
The normal financing, Chair, is we'll get a term sheet and we negotiate the loan agreement and or facility agreement, then we just get the money so that we apply to whatever purpose that facility agreement is for. This structure, compared to that, we were going to give a project or assets to Warong. They will develop those projects together with their appointed engineering, procurement, and construction entities. And that will be done under a special purpose vehicle. And Warong will also go and raise funding and put money into that special purpose vehicle. So we would not be interacting with the lenders as we would do in the normal course of business. And once the project is funded using the funds that Warong has galvanized, and the project is constructed, then it gets handed over to us for use under a lease agreement. So it's a lease, it's an asset lease kind of structure. But in the pure financing, we just go and raise money, we get the money, and then we pay the contractors ourselves. So I think that's the major distinction between the two structures, and that really complicated. I would say our lives were not as simple as we would go and borrow money in the ordinary course of business, because we had to deal with the lot of entities, the structure that Warong was proposing in their proposal.
Yes. And you also, in the same paragraph, make mention that sometimes when Eskom is confronted with projects like those that you're not familiar with, you would engage services of an advisor to advise you as to how to go about it.
Yes, Chair. I think I was making an example. The context of that was to state the different types of upfront fees that we would use to have. So in instances, I mean, this we did way back in 2009, we've never done it again, where we are not sure of the product that we're going to, the Treasury product that we're going to utilize and proposed. In this instance, it was an export credit agency financing, which we were not quite familiar with. Then we solicited the services of a financial advisor who was acting for us, who was advising us. And once the transaction is successful, then we would pay that advisor a success fee. So that's the context in which that advisor was mentioned.
Thank you. And then in the next paragraph, you deal then with the signing of the term sheet in December of 2016, and you say that the circumstances under which it was signed are not very clear to you. And I want to understand, you were within Treasury, you're working under or reporting to Mr. Andre Pillay. Did you bother to ask why were we going to sign it?
I did, Chair.
I'm sorry, the next paragraph being?
Being paragraph 9, I beg your pardon, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, if
Thank
you can mention them as
That's
you
just
go
the
along,
paragraph.
so-
I will do so, thank you.
Yeah.
Paragraph 9, yes.
In my recollection, Chair, is that when I was asked to put together a memo because we're going to sign the term sheet, Andrew's response is that Anoch made the proposal that the term sheet must be signed, which is not common practice for us.
And you also deal in the same paragraph with the trip to China?
Yes, Chair, my assessment of the situation was that shortly after the signing, there were arrangements for the trip to China. So for me, it appeared as if this was good gesture before that trip to China, so that they can go when they face the Chinese principles, that at least we've got something that we have agreed upon. So that is, it was not said to me, that is the reading of me signing the indicative term sheet shortly before the trip to China.
And you make a comparison of some of the proposals we made in the term sheets and you attach those. Is there anything other than what you've told the chairperson that you want to highlight, where you deal with the various corrected term sheets? Or is it what you've told or comprehensive enough that you don't have to go back to those?
You mean in this paragraph?
Yes, yes. Where you deal, for instance, you deal with the corrected version in Annexure SS22. Yes.
Oh, yeah, it's the versions of the term sheets as I was reviewing. So I would say I've looked at it. This term sheet seems fine.
Yes.
Yes. So it's for the same proposal.
It's for the same proposal.
Same proposal, not different proposals.
Yes, but in the end, you were also of the view that it could be signed.
Yes, I did say, yeah.
Yes.
Especially considering the non-binding nature of it. So when I reviewed, I said, look, it's for what it's worth, it's okay for us to proceed.
Yes.
I did say that.
Thank you. We have dealt with the signed one with Mr. Pillay yesterday. It's the same one that you put up as Annexure SS23, am I correct?
Yes.
Thank you. And then you deal with the preparations then for the trip to China.
Yes.
At this point, there's no RFP in place.
There is no RFP in place because it's in December, January, when the preparations are being made.
Yes.
And Chair, in that I was asked, well, I was told that there's going to be a trip to China and it involves CDB, which is China Development Bank, which we had a relationship at that point in time. We had a facility signed and I was not involved in that transaction. My colleague, Judy Raphael, was the one handling that transaction. So my response was, I mean, if the discussions are not about something quite substantial as the signing of the facility agreement, we're just going there for a term sheet, and there's a trip about China Development Bank, Judy is the one that's most appropriate to go. So I didn't go. So what I did, I introduced Rajiv to Lerato, who was assisting us with the arrangements. That's what that paragraph says.
Did Judy go? Ms. Raphael, Judy Raphael, did she go?
No, she didn't go. The only people that went to China was Mr. Anoch Singh, Mr. Andrew Pillay, Bobby Cavender, and Prish Cavender. Judy didn't go.
If then Judy Raphael was the one who was dealing with the China Development Bank, didn't you find it odd that she would be left out of the trip if part of the trip was to meet with the China Development Bank?
Ordinarily, yes, I did.
I did. You did?
Yes.
And did you ask from Mr. Pillay as to why is Judy being left behind? Because she was dealing with this, she's au fait with this China Development Bank loan?
Well, Chair, I didn't get involved in the, as I'm saying, in the arrangements. So I introduced Lerato to Rajiv. So I found it odd at the end when they left that Judy was not part of it. So I didn't get involved in the preparation, so that during the course of the preparation I were to ask the question. Yes.
And you've attached the correspondence between Lerato, as you mentioned here, together with Mr. Rajiv Thomas.
Correct. Yes.
On the preparations
Yes.
as to the logistical arrangements.
Yes.
Mr. Andrew Pillay told the chairperson that ESCOM actually paid for the trip to China. That ESCOM paid for that trip.
It is usual for us to pay for our trips. I confirmed with Lerato as to who paid for the trip. Lerato said ESCOM paid for all the arrangements. The only thing that they might not have paid for was the transfers in between, when they get to China, transfers in between various entities.
In fact,
But for travel and accommodation to and fro, ESCOM covered those expenses.
yes. If I may just to wind up that point, if I may refer the chairperson to SS 23, which appears from page, I beg your pardon, SS 25 to SS 28. The correspondence between Mr. Rajiv Thomas and, maybe just to take the chairperson to page 258.
Is that on the other bundle?
No, it's still the same bundle, Mr. Chair. Page 258.
Well,
SS 27.
the last page on this bundle that I'm having is page 238, 232.
No, that can be.
Yeah, page 232 is the last page on this one.
Mr. Chairman, I'll have to sort that out because what is the last page on yours, Mr. Shweni?
That is exhibit.
25, on SS 27,
Yes,
it's 259.
yes,
It's the exhibit U6A.
yes.
The last page on mine is 232.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, we'll have to look into, I don't know how that could have happened when the copies were made from the same bundles, but we'll look into it. May I just ask the witness to just read it so that in the meantime, the chairperson can get the gist of what I want to convey. Could you just read what Lerato was saying to Mr. Rajiv Thomas and his response, please?
So do I start backwards?
Backwards, yes.
So on page 259, okay, that's Rajiv Thomas
Yes.
on 259. So let me go to Lerato's,
Yes.
which is on page
258.
258. She's saying, Dear Rajiv, please see attached program for scheduled trip as requested. May you kindly assist with the following. May you please assist us with transportation from Beijing Capital International Airport to the Ritz-Carlton 1 Ji Cheng Fang E Street, Chai Xeng for Mr. Prish Govender, Mr. Bubi Govender on Tuesday, 10th January 27. Their flight is scheduled to arrive at 14:40. Please also let me know if you can assist with all transfers, including airport transfers and logistics from Wednesday 11 to Friday 13 January 2017. Please note that the delegates are scheduled to depart from Beijing International Airport at 18:30 on Friday 13 January 2017. Please take that into consideration when you plan a site visit. Please confirm that the start time of the meetings on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday so that we can indicate on our schedule. Please also give us a bit more information regarding the proposed site visit. Lastly, let me send me the name, designation, and contact details of the contact person in Beijing. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Yes, and his response?
Hi, Lerato, please be assured that we'll take care of all logistics requirements of delegation from ESCOM.
Yes. Did you ever try and establish as to what sort of arrangements did they then pay for the ESCOM delegation?
From who?
From Rajiv Thomas's, Mr. Rajiv Thomas's group. or that is the Huarong group, what is it that they actually paid for those officials?
Sorry, no, I didn't.
You did not look into
No,
that?
I didn't get into the details
will
of
you-
the arrangement.
Will you be in a position to get that information?
I can
for
request
the
from
commission?
Lerato.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. But it seems consistent to, I don't know the exact details,
Yes.
but it seems consistent with what she told me, that for what was happening internally once they land, Orong will take care of those transfers and everything else.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Then you deal with the outcomes in the same paragraph 11. Paragraph 11, you say, trip to China and the outcomes. Could you just speak to that, please?
Yes, there was a letter that I attached, which is from Mr. Thomas. I think it's annexure SS29, thanking
What
the-
page is that now?
This is page 13 of the statement, paragraph 11, Mr. Chairman. We took Mr. Andre Pillay through that correspondence.
Yes.
The letter that he wrote and the letter that
Yes.
Mr. Thomas wrote
Okay,
back to him.
yeah. So that's what it's about that letter, or both those letters and the response. And one thing that I did not say in my statement, which I found as I was working through my emails, is that Andre sends his response to me to say, please read this response before I sign. So the paragraph talks about the letter and that the fact that Mr. Pillay confirms in his response that this will be subject to further analysis. So following that, there was the signing of the binding term sheet.
Yes. Why do you say that that is the outcome of the China trip?
Well, that's the evidence, because I was not there.
Yes.
That's the evidence that I have in terms of where those discussions what transpired, let me put it that way.
Yes.
What
Did you get an impression that these discussions resulted in the parties agreeing that this would be signed when they returned to South Africa? Or
From reading Rajiv's letter,
yes.
but from reading Andre's response, that was not the case.
Yes.
So that could have been the discussions, but from reading Rajiv's, it creates the impression that what we spoke about, especially with regards to the rates and everything else, it's agreed. But reading Andre's response, it's not.
It's not. Thank you. And you also deal in the same paragraph then with the submission, which you also discussed with Mr. Andre Pillay. It's the
Yes.
same submission at SS32, am I correct, to the IFC board, and their extract and what they approved as the board.
Yes, and I was not involved in the preparation of this submission, but I was just tabulating the order of events. So, on inquiry from Andre, he said, Anoch told them, as I said initially, that we must go and present this to the IFC. That is when I was explaining why the ALCO could not have been presented. So the submission was a mandate to negotiate and conclude, and then IFC gave us the mandate just to negotiate and say, but not conclude. So that's what I'm dealing with there.
Beg your pardon, Mr. Chairman. You also deal with that in paragraph 12 at page 13. You also deal with what happened then after that led up to the signing of the term sheet.
Yes,
I'm sorry. You say paragraph 12, page 13.
Oh, yes, sure.
Which lever arch file are you using?
The same one that we were dealing with before break.
Exhibit U6A.
U6A, that's the one. Yes.
please just hold on. I think you must please make sure, I think during lunch, this liver arch file exhibit U6A must be paginated throughout as a liver arch file, if that can be done.
Yeah.
Because this thing of talking about page 13 that relates to the particular statement and not page 13 of the whole bundle is creating problems. So if that can be done, please.
Thank you. The other alternative, Mr. Chairperson, would be to just take out all of that and put it in a separate bundle altogether.
But also, during the lunch break, will you and those who can assist you just please go through my files, the witness files, and your files. Make sure that every page is the same.
Yes.
And that I've got everything that you have got and that the witness has got. Because as you had a few minutes ago, I didn't have some of the pages towards the end that you and the witness have. So if during the lunch break we can have that sorted out so that after lunch we don't have these problems.
Thank you. Thank you. Has the chairperson found page 13?
Page 13, eh?
That's correct.
Yeah, I've got, thank you.
Thank you. The witness was going to talk to paragraph 12.
Yes, Chair, in preparation for the signing of this binding term sheet, I made comments on the later versions of, or the latest versions of the term sheets, and those comments were sent to Rajiv, communicated to my principal, Andre. There was a point where he referred me, and I think I was still querying some of these fees and the pricing. So he referred me to his letter that he sent to Andre. And he said to me, please go and talk to your boss, in a little bit of a dismissive kind of way, not an engaging in terms of their issues that I was raising. So, but unfortunately at that time, Andrew was not there. I did see in one of the emails to say, I'll speak to Andrew when he comes back on Monday on that. So he referred me to both letters. My recollection with that, I would have mentioned that, but I don't remember the details of the conversation. So we prepared for signing. I asked one of my colleague, Itabeleng, to prepare a signing memo. I gave him background in terms of the memo that I prepared for the signing of the non-binding term sheet and the term sheet itself. So the memos were prepared and the signing took place on the 14th of March at Megawatt Park. And I was present at that signing. Yes. So the memo for the signing, in line with the signing request, recommended that we could sign the term sheet.
Yes.
What we did not do was to solicit at this stage the services of the internal legal, but in the next paragraph, I did to mention that this was against the advice of the external legal.
Yes. So at this point, when then everybody is preparing memos for the signing, ESCOM is happy that this should be brought forward, should be supported, that the term sheet could be signed. That's the support that, especially the Treasury Department of ESCOM, which was led by Mr. Andre Pillay, and you being part of it.
The issues were still there. The issues were still not resolved, but in line with the signing request or instruction, the memo says we're okay to sign.
Yes. Is there any particular reason why legal internal was not at this time engaged on this matter?
I honestly don't know, Chair. We engaged as internal legal at a very late stage of the process. And we should have engaged them much earlier. So I think we went along with White and Case's advice. Perhaps the thinking was that we're still early days in the process, but in my view, I think we should have gathered a multidisciplinary team from onset, considering the intricacies and the complications of this proposal.
Yes. But then in the next paragraph, paragraph 13 at page 14, you deal then with the White and Case memo or advice that they had given.
That's correct.
Yes, and that advice too was not followed, is that correct? That's what you deal with in that paragraph?
Yes. How I knew about the advice is via emails, and I read it. But it seems as if us proceeding with the signing of the term sheet against White and Case's advice, that advice was not followed.
Yes. And then over the next page, you deal with the most important matter of the RFP at paragraph 14, page 15. Could you just take us through that process?
Yes, Chair. I opened the paragraph with what we dealt with initially on the RFI, which is that Khatliso advised me that because we could not contract out of RFP had to be issued. So my involvement, so she ran with the process. My involvement was also during the evaluation phase. So I would have sat with her to discuss the strategy, but I also was allocated to be part of the team that were evaluating proposals, including Orong. So Orong pitched, they submitted their proposal, which was in a form of a term sheet predominantly and other annexures. But the term sheet that they submitted in the proposal was the term sheet that was signed on the 14th. And that in itself sort of created a little bit of uncertainty on how we're going to proceed going forward as the entire team, not necessarily the team that was evaluating proposals with or wrong. Because what happens, the teams are allocated, we go as teams to go and review the proposals, we gather as a big group to go through all the proposals. So when we gathered as a big group, the question was posed, which in all honesty I could not answer, Chair, because I was objectively putting myself, as if I have never dealt with wrong, but the reasons this was allocated to me is because of my background. So I was not going to stand in that committee and defend and say, no, this is the reason. So the committee asked, how do we proceed with this? Because it seems as if it's far down the line. There's signed term sheets, there's been discussions. So the conclusion of the evaluation committee is that we just don't know how to deal with this. Let's take it out of this process. There were other similar proposals, not similar in nature or in the outcome of the discussion, but they were similar in the sense that there were other parallel processes which were running. For instance, the bond process was already, we had a bond process, coal monetization. So when we identified some of those proposals as well, we said this looks like a duplication. So let's take them out of, also the committee decided to take them out of the RFP process. But it was not for the same reason. Let me emphasize, Chair. It was not for the same reason that Warong was taken out, because Warong was advanced. I think there's a report that my colleague was running with the process that she outlined in terms of how we're dealing with Warong, how we're dealing with the other proposals.
So I will not be correct then to suggest that Warong was favored in this whole process, because Warong's proposal had already served before ESCOM, the term sheets had been reviewed, and Warong puts in the same term sheet that's signed in December, and none of the other people that make, entities that make proposals to ESCOM have had that advantage. So at that point, would I be correct to say that the RFP really was just a sham?
That's a difficult question, Chair. Not by the committee that was evaluating that, because I was part of that meeting. So the committee that was evaluating the proposals did not set aside Warong because it received extraordinary favor compared to the others. It's just that the committee did not know how to deal with that. Perhaps outside of the committee that was evaluating, you could say that Warong had a bit of a head start compared to the others, because none of the others had their term sheets signed. None of the other proposals or entities perhaps had visits that were paid. In that regard, you could argue that Warong had a head start.
Yes, and then I wouldn't, putting a head start is like they are in a race, like your athletes. They are not athletes. We're talking a procurement process. They are not just simply given a head start, but they are actually favored in the sense that the other, in the RFP, it's not stated, am I correct, that there is a proposal that we already have. We have looked into it. We've gone to China to do whatever investigations that we are doing. The term sheet for this particular entity has been signed. So just so you know, if you do or you are interested to submit your proposals, just know that there is already an entity. That doesn't come out in the RFP, am I correct?
In the RFP letter that's sent out to the public, no.
No. Now, so it cannot be, therefore, that they simply had a head start. They were actually favored, looking at the actions of ESCOM up to that point when the RFP was issued.
When you say they, you mean Warong?
Warong, yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
Remember, there is Warong and there are others.
Yes, the other, yes. Warong was favored, yes.
Well, you could argue, but Chair, it's difficult to put on the RFP letter that's going out into the market. Well, I'm not an expert on that. My colleague could respond much better. But to me, it's not appropriate to put on the RFP letter that's going out into the market that, by the way, we might be receiving a proposal from an entity that has a signed term sheet, and because you don't know whether they're going to tender. So to put that into the RFP letter, for me, or letting the market know that this is what's coming, not knowing at the point in time when you're signing or issuing that RFP letter, you would receive something from Warong with a signed term sheet, and we have gone to China.
Yes, and then in the assessment then of that proposal, supposing that you're correct, that you can't put it out there, but then it means the public is kept in the dark as to the interactions that ESCOM has had with one of the entities that submit a proposal. The public doesn't know, because the whole process of the public participation process is to make sure that the public knows exactly what's happening within that process. Am I right?
Correct, Chair, in the sense that the public did not know.
Yes.
When we evaluating, because we close during the closed period, ideally we don't negotiate or talk about the RFP that the proponent or proponents have put forward. So nobody would know who bidded, and nobody would know who did not bid.
Yes.
And under what circumstances and what's contained therein.
Then-
So we'll be guided as well by some confidentiality in terms of letting know how many bids. We don't even tell during that process. And some of the banks, when they come and visit, they do fish around, not necessarily for this one, but for other proposals, wanting to know who bid. We keep that very close.
Well, let's get some clarification. I understood Mr. Andre Pillay last week to be saying that the proposals that were submitted were not competing with Warong's proposal, and that ESCOM had different funding requirements because that did arise. Is that your understanding as well, or am I confusing anything?
That's correct, Chair. I can demonstrate that with an example. If we go out into the international bond market, there's one thing that we're looking for is 20 billion rands sourced from the international investors. So
Yes.
that's one product
Yes.
that we're looking for. So
Yes.
there's homogeneity in terms of what we
Yes.
want.
Yes.
Whereas for this one, because it was innovative funding, we could get anything from the likes of Warong and some of them they submitted, by the way, some conventional proposals, which in their mind they thought they were innovative. So you could get a wide range of proposals. And so it is very difficult when you do the evaluation to say, this one comes first, this one is number 2, this one is number 3, because you're comparing different offerings.
But if you, well, in this kind of situation, wasn't ESCOM's position that, 1, we need funding, 2, we know how much we need so much. And when you then issued the RFP, you were asking anyone out there of the investors to come forward and make a proposal whether they could give you the money that you wanted and what the terms and conditions would be, or what features that arrangement would have. And then you have Warong, you have somebody else effectively doing the same, namely, I can give you funding, these would be the terms and conditions that I want, or these are the features or important features of the arrangement I want to have with you. And therefore, as ESCOM, you look at the different ones, but in the end, you want to end up with the money on the best terms that you can have from different entities. Was that not the position?
That was the position, Chair, bearing in mind that the different entities would not be providing a proposal for one funding solution. So you would get exactly what you're saying, but it will be, the other one would be proposing another product, the other one would be proposing another product, because this was quite open. It was not a closed request to say, this is what we are doing, we're doing the bond or just doing the export credit agency. It could be anything. So, but what you're saying is correct.
Well, the part that I want to make sure I understand clearly is the proposition that they were not competing. Because I'm thinking if as ESCOM you want, let's say you wanted 10 billion, for argument's sake, they all want to give you 10 billion rand. Or maybe some can't afford to give you 10 billion, but they are proposing they can give you 5 billion, maybe you can get another 5 billion somewhere else. But they all want to give you the money that you want. And what would be different would be the terms and conditions under which they want to give it to you. That's what I would imagine. Some of the terms I would imagine might be the same features, but there must be some difference somewhere, I would imagine. And then I would think that as ESCOM, you then have a look at all of these and seek to choose the one that offers you something that best suits your situation. So if that is the situation, I don't understand how it is said they are not competing. I can understand maybe that they are not competing if one wants to give you 5 billion, another one wants to give you 5 billion, and then maybe in terms of the terms, maybe you can have a deal with this one for 5 billion, have a deal with another one for 5 billion, then you have your 10 billion, but maybe they are not competing in that sense. But I'm not sure that I understand the idea that they are not competing if they all want to give you the money that you want, but under different terms and conditions.
The only difference here, Chair, is that yes, the terms and conditions would be different. And yes, what we're looking for is this bag of money at the end. But it is the manner in which this bag of money is being delivered to ESCOM. So if I were to use the example of the water, in a homogeneous situation, we would say we want so many liters of water, but it can only be bottled water and so many, the quantity. But in this instance, yes, we know the quantity that we wanted, but the suppliers could bring the water in bottles, they can give them in glasses, in whatever different form. Hence the different products which could not be competing. Whereas if we said specifically the delivery of water must come only via one means, which is bottled water, then all the proposals that we have, although they are different in terms and conditions, but they will be competing. So in this instance, that is not the case. My analogy for water might not be too appropriate.
But these people that we are talking about, it's their business to lend money, isn't it? Or they make money out of lending money.
Yes, Chair, that is correct, and they've got different products
Yes.
which they use to lend money. For example, we had institutions submitting proposals, one institution,
Yeah.
and they say, for us, we think what's innovative, it's A, it's B, and C. And they're talking about 3 different ways of satisfying the same requirement of giving us money. And these are so different in nature and characteristics such that you cannot evaluate them and say this comes as number one, because they are just distinct. So you'd have one entity doing that.
But each one of them wants you to choose their proposal, isn't it?
That's correct, whatever we're comfortable with. That's correct, Chair.
Yes. So because if you choose their proposal, they'll make money out of the transaction.
Correct, Chair.
They don't want you to choose somebody else's proposal, because then they lose out, isn't it?
Correct, Chair.
So why are you saying they are not competing? Each one wants to have a transaction with ESCOM, and that transaction will give them certain benefits.
Yes.
Another one wants the same transaction with ESCOM in terms of being the one who is chosen,
Yes.
because if they are chosen, that transaction will give them certain benefits. And I would imagine that when one is chosen and the other is not chosen, the one that's not chosen doesn't feel good about that, because business that they thought they would do, or money that they thought they would make out of the transaction, now somebody else will make that money.
Yes, Chair. I think competing in the sense, in the sense that you're saying it is correct.
Yes.
But competing, I don't know what Mr. Pile was saying, but competing in terms of the same or homogeneity of the product. This
Yes.
RFP was wide.
Yeah, maybe
But-
that's what he was talking about. But I think both Ms. Norman and I, looking at issues of procurement, we're looking at competing simply to say the purpose of any government department or entity issuing an RFP is precisely to say, I want to see what is out there. I want them to compete, and then I will take the one that gives us the best terms and conditions. And they are competing, and everyone wants to be the one that is chosen. And then just like a tender, ultimately one is chosen. The others who are not chosen are not happy about it, but if they have no grounds to take the issue further, that's the end of it. So you would say, in terms of you would accept that in terms of the fact that all these entities want to conclude a transaction with ESCOM,
Yes.
they are competing. But in competing, they come up with solutions that are maybe very different from one another.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Could you just read the last paragraph of paragraph 14 at page 15?
The Warong proposal met most of the requirements of the RFP. However, during the evaluation process, it was difficult to determine how to deal with it, since it had progressed much further. And in brackets, it says, with a signed term sheet and board approvals to negotiate, compared to other proposals. Is that the paragraph?
Yeah, that's paragraph, and then just move forward.
There were other proposals that were also set aside to be dealt with under separate processes. And then in brackets, make an example of the bonds, export credit agencies, and coal monetization.
Thank you.
Yes, I think the discussion we have just had takes us back to here, and actually it arose from this, from the fact that if you accept that Warong and the other entities that made proposals were competing in the sense that we have discussed, if you accept that, the question is, how is this competition being conducted in circumstances where one of the competitors has already got a term sheet signed, a binding term sheet signed with ESCOM? Because that seems to be an unacceptable way of dealing with this situation.
Clearly, Chair, I think that's the point that Ms. Norman was raising, and I used the example of a head start, because this entity is not competing, as we have discussed, on, even though they are bringing in a unique and different solution on the same level playing field compared to the others. So your point is valid. Hence the concern that was raised by the evaluation committee, if I can use that to say, these guys are not on the same level as the other people. We just don't know how to deal with them.
Well, at this stage, the term sheet that had been signed was the binding one, isn't it?
That's correct, Chair.
So, if one has regard to the terms of the binding term sheet, I know that last week we did have a look at its terms much more closely than we may have done this morning. But had you not, in effect, that is now ESCOM, by signing that term sheet, effectively and for all intents and purposes, said to who are wrong, we will have a transaction with you. We will have a transaction with you in terms of this.
That could have been, Chair.
In other words, what I'm doing, I just want you to give me the benefit of your own understanding and interpretation of this signed term sheet in the context of what was still to be done, namely to look at other proposals, whether you wouldn't agree, you wouldn't say that the signing of that term sheet, having regard to its terms, could be regarded as, for all intents and purposes, ESCOM having said we are wrong, we will have a transaction with you because the terms are agreed.
I think my understanding, Chair, is that we will proceed to have discussions, because that's my understanding of what the term sheet represents. We will proceed to have discussions subject to whatever approvals that you might have as the organization. But the signing of the term sheet, save for the contradictions that were there, which I think you're saying you discussed, you kind of agree or lock yourself or give the impression that this is the understanding on which the negotiations and discussions will take place without much deviation from what we have signed. But that might not, with due respect, Chair, translate to the fact that if negotiations do not go well, then because we've signed the binding term sheet, we will have an agreement signed at the end.
Yeah.
So I think that will be subject to the discussions.
Yes.
But my understanding is that this is the basis, and maybe there's room, but not much room for deviation.
Yes. So it should be expected that a term sheet, a binding term sheet, is likely to lead to the signing of an agreement, but it's not a guarantee that an agreement will be signed. Would that be the right way of putting it?
That's the fair expectation, yes.
Yes, okay. But would you accept that with regard to the other entities who have made a proposal, if they were to know before their proposals are considered, or if they were to know that before their proposals were considered, ESCOM had already signed a binding term sheet with one of their competitors, would you accept that they would feel aggrieved, or would you say they would not feel aggrieved? Or is it something difficult to say, as you say?
It's difficult
Look
to
at the rules of fair competition. Section
Yes.
217 says there should be fair competition. And by doing an RFP, you are trying to adhere to rules of fair competition.
Look, clear from that perspective and the fact that this it's signed, and the implications of that signing, as we have discussed, that there might be no room for much deviation. So these guys that you engaging on the part of the competition are not on equal footing as us. So it's more likely to result in those parties not being happy.
You yourself would not regard it as fair to do things that way, would you?
No.
Yes,
No.
you would not, yeah. I thought that was the thrust of your committee's concern when you said, when you met, you didn't know how to deal with the Huarong proposal because there was this binding term sheet that had been signed. Was that the thrust of your committee's concern?
Yes, and the fact that this has already solicited some mandates, so that was the term sheet, and also the fact that this wrong proposal has been tabled to solicit mandate to, one
Yes.
mandate to negotiate and conclude.
Yes. Now, you did tell us already, but I would like you to repeat because I want to be sure that I understood correctly what you then decided to do as a committee in the light of this situation, in the light of Huarong's proposal, which already had a binding term sheet that had been signed.
Because the committee did not know what to do with it, so it took it out of the process. So saying, when we continue with the evaluation, the wrong proposal, when we score and say these are the proposals that we're going to proceed with, will not be part of this. So let's take it out of this process, so to say.
So your committee was there to evaluate the proposals, is that right? What was the purpose of your committee?
Well, it's the evaluation committee. So the
Yes,
team
yes.
does the evaluation and see whether this meets the requirements of the RFP. And then we go and feedback in the bigger committee. And that's the bigger evaluation committee which said, we just don't know how to deal with this, so let's take it out of the process.
Yes. So you then proceeded to evaluate the other proposals that did not have a binding term sheet.
That's correct, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if one were to ask you, how did the evaluation end, what would your answer be?
There were proposals which were, my recollection, which were up for continuation, that we could proceed with this, but we need to follow the process, write a report so that we get an approval. But that RFP was abandoned.
Thank you. So we've
I'm sorry. If the Huarong proposal was accepted ultimately, and there was a contract entered into by ESCOM with Huarong based on the terms, on the binding term sheet, of course, whatever else they might have agreed additionally later on, but substantially based on that, would there have been room for ESCOM to make use of any of the other proposals or room or need to make use of any of the other proposals that your committee was evaluating?
Yes, Chair, we would. Because the evaluation of those proposals, and we, as I said, they were unique in nature, so they would have been. In fact, as I said, Warong was the only one who was offering this. So, but we looked at the suitability of other proposals as well. So those would also fill in the funding requirement depending on whether the proposals were accepted to ESCOM.
I take it that what you are saying means that Warong's proposal wasn't going to result in ESCOM getting the total amount that it wanted in terms of the RFP that had been issued. Because if Warong was chosen as the one and it was going to give you the amount that you wanted as ESCOM, I can't see why you would need the other proposals.
Chair, even though the amount that was proposed by Warong was quite significant and substantial, which was one of the benefits that we saw as the team. But that amount would have been, would have benefited. Let me not say dispersed, because in terms of this structure, this was not gonna be dispersed when we receive the bag of money like the other banks, but it would have been paid to the special purpose vehicle where the projects, identified and approved projects, were being constructed. So it would have benefited ESCOM over the period. So the amount, whether it's 1.5 or 2 billion, it would not have benefited the ESCOM immediately
Yeah.
in one period.
Yes.
Because there would have been a back-to-back kind of milestone arrangement to say, when this project is being constructed, at certain points in time, which perhaps the project is constructed over 2 to 3 years, this is where the inverted commas benefit flows to ESCOM. So you would look into other projects that will complement the funding requirement for that particular period, including what Warong will benefit for that particular period. I'm not sure if I'm making sense.
So I guess that what you are saying goes back to what we touched on when we talked about whether these proposals were competing. What you are saying is ESCOM, by ESCOM accepting Warong's proposal, didn't mean that ESCOM's funding requirements would be met in full.
Correct, Chair. Not in full.
It would meet, Warong would meet certain requirements, funding requirements of ESCOM, but not all of them.
And largely, depending on the spending profile of that project, which has been identified and submitted and constructed by Warong. So if for whatever reason the spending profile of that amounts to 85% of the funding requirement for this year, and Warong executes successfully that project, then it means 85% of the funding requirement in via the structure would have been fulfilled. But if for that period it satisfies 50%, but because the project is being constructed over a year or 2 or 3 years, then only that portion.
But the funding requirements of ESCOM that were covered by the RFP that was issued were they all the requirements that ESCOM needed to be taken care of as at that time? In other words, when these other entities made proposals and Warong had its proposal, if Warong was given a contract, as you have said, it wouldn't have met all the requirements, satisfied all the requirements for funding that ESCOM had. So the others may then come in. Could one talk about kind of, I don't know whether topping up is the right term, but in other words, Warong is unable to cover all the funding requirements of ESCOM, so they cover what they can. And then ESCOM looks at what other entities can cover.
Chair,
Is that
that's
right?
correct. And that is even correct within the line within the funding plan under which this RFP was issued, which is
Yes.
structured products.
Yes, yes.
But you must remember, Chair, the funding requirements of the organization were not only going to be
Yes.
fulfilled,
Yes.
but that by that line item.
Yes.
There were other components as well in
Yes.
the funding plan,
Yes.
which we were going to exploit various times to fulfill the entire. But if we zoom into that line, which is the structured products, and Warong benefit, or for a lack of a better word, disbursement based on that structure, fulfills only 50% of what was tabulated in that line, which
Yes.
I'm not quite
Yes.
sure what it is.
Yes.
Then we'd have to top up with the others.
Yes, okay, no, that's fine. So all the other entities that made proposals, whose proposals your committee was looking at, their proposals also fell under the same line that Warong fell under.
That's
is that
correct,
right?
Chair,
Yeah.
because it was
Yeah.
it was for that line.
I guess hence your concession that in the sense in which I put it to you, they can be said to have been competing, because if one, like say Warong, was able to satisfy all the requirements under that line, then there would be nothing to give to the others. Am I right? Under that line.
Yes, if Warong becomes the only first preferred,
Yes.
and we decide not to give to the others.
Yes.
Maybe I need just to qualify my last response, Chair.
Yes.
And I did indicate initially that even though this was meant to capture non-conventional funding products,
Yes.
but we did get proposals which could fit
Yes.
in the other lines
Yes.
of the
Yes.
funding proposal.
Yes.
And it was for the same reason
Yes.
that those proposals were sort of taken out
Yes.
to say because there's a process for the international bond, ECAs,
Yes.
so we'll not consider them
Yeah.
here. So I just wanted to qualify that
Yeah.
not all the proposals that we received
Yes.
were particularly fitting
Yes.
into
the
that
line.
line. We
Yes.
just got
Yeah.
a wide mix.
Yes. Okay. No, thank you. That has clarified things too.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just want to understand, in the procurement industry, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not sure that there's a process where you can actually say, I'm going to set this one aside. It's either you disqualify or you accept a proposal. Or am I wrong?
I don't know.
I'm just trying to
Well,
understand.
Well, he did say that procurement is
It's
not
not-
particularly
Yeah.
his area. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't
Maybe,
know. But what you're saying seems to make some sense.
yes, maybe I shouldn't say procurement. Maybe I should just say evaluation. When you evaluate, you either disqualify or you accept.
Yes.
Yes. So when you say then Huarong was set aside, what does that actually mean? The Huarong's
It means-
proposal, because of its nature, according to you, was of the fact that it had advanced from the others, it was set aside. What do you actually mean?
We wouldn't proceed to deal with it under this process effectively. I think you just kicking this out of that RFP process.
Okay.
So I don't want to use the words disqualify or what.
Yes. So
Yeah, maybe, my understanding, and you can just confirm, my understanding is that you were simply saying, we don't know how to deal with the Huarong proposal because there is already a binding term sheet.
Correct.
Evaluation is supposed to take place before there is anything binding. So we will deal with these ones that do not have any binding term sheet and deal with them. We don't know what to do with that one, and we will leave it to somebody else to decide what should be done, but we are not going to evaluate it. I think that's what you meant.
That's what the committee said.
They were not going to evaluate it, but they were not saying it's being disqualified or whatever, but they're simply saying, as a committee, we won't evaluate it.
Yes.
And even though, I mean, to add to what you're saying, Chair, even though the proposal met, I did mention in the statement, most of
Yes.
the requirements of the RFP,
Yes.
but in all honesty, the committee just did not know what to
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
with it.
Thank you. In answering some of the questions, you used the word that the RFP process was abandoned.
Nothing came out of that RFP. I mean, the report was written as far as my understanding from my colleague, but we never contracted out of that. So even some of the qualifying proposals which were there, we never followed up with the entities and say, we are going ahead with your proposal. My understanding is that that was not the case.
Yes. Thank you. So then if Mr. Pillay had told the commission that that process was not abandoned, that certainly cannot be correct.
If he said it was not abandoned,
Yes.
well, the correct version is, my understanding, my knowledge is that we never contracted out of that. And I think it was during the time of when we were facing all these qualifications. All the qualifications.
When you say it was abandoned, to the extent that you may have said that, you mean the steps that normally follow after an evaluation when there's been an RFP were not followed in this case.
That's correct, Chair, to
Were
say.
not pursued.
Yes, to say we like proposal 5 and 6, we don't like the rest, so let's write to them and so that we can contract,
Appoint the
upon,
service
almost use
provider.
out of,
Yeah.
we can issue or award based on this. That never happened. So that's
Yeah.
what I mean
That's
about,
what you mean, yeah.
about being abandoned.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Thank you. And then paragraph 15, page 16, just hardly a month thereafter, ESCOM is engaged in negotiations with Huarong. Could you just take us through that process? That is hardly a month after the RFP process had commenced on the 12th of April 2017. Could you just talk to that, please?
So clearly, Chair, the opening word of that paragraph is quite telling.
Yes.
Because when I say parallel, because it was at the period that sort of closing report, or the report that was compiled by my colleague, it was not written and issued. So the assumption is that this RFP is not closed, so hence the word a parallel. So Mr. Pubikav checked on my emails on the 10th of April. He sent an email, and I'm included in that email, and apologies, I did not put that as part of this because I found it later. That now that the RFP has been signed, now that the term sheet has been signed, and based on the discussions on the term sheet, we need to commence discussions on alpha. It was still alpha at that stage. So that was the genesis, excuse me, of the agreement, and meetings were set up, and he alludes to the fact that our legal is ready. So the other parties, they must just indicate their availability, to which I think Rajiv responds to say we'll alert on, let know, advise Norton Rose, and set the agenda for the meetings to come. So that happened. I did take part in some of the, especially the startup meetings, and the signed term sheet, and there was a presentation as well, were part of the pack that we sent to White and Case. During this process, which was a little bit drawn out, I did telephonically think about Ms. Gabriela Palacios Flask, because we worked with her on other transactions. And we were still working with her on export credit agency financing. And I said, look, there's a lot of asset development, construction element involved in these discussions for the alpha. There isn't much for financing. Would you be interested to be part of it? So I invited to some of the conference calls.
So then the RFP is not concluded, so to speak, but then ESCOM decides that we're going to run with this proposal by having engagements and then make sure that the agreement is signed, if we agree.
I agree, because I did say in the supplemental statement, Chair, that this isn't contravention of any normal procurement sort of regulations, where one would, while the procurement process is up and running, on the side you engage with the same entity for the same proposals. I make the example of the banks, that when we've got a RFP evaluation process running and we have to see the banks, we tell them that we're not about to discuss any of your proposals. In fact, we tell them that we're in a process. If you're going to talk about anything to do with this, then we're not available for discussion. So it is in contravention.
Yes. And then in paragraph 16, you deal with the fees which you've already highlighted and the concerns that you highlighted.
Yes.
Unless there is anything in particular that you wish to highlight, right up to page 19, because this is where maybe we could, up to 16.3, deal with those matters roughly. What is it that you are raising? But you've already talked to those, unless you feel that you want to emphasize any of the matters that you had raised there.
Yeah, Chair, this is quite a long paragraph, yes. But I need to highlight the fact that this, as I said initially, one of, we realized that the quantum in terms of these fees, perhaps based on the fact that the term sheet was signed already, it's not that open for discussion. In actual fact, with the advice or comments from White and Case during our interaction, they do mention the fact that, look, the ship has sailed. I think they were talking about the 1.6, the margins. The margin had slightly improved by 30 basis points. So there was never rigorous discussions following the signing of the term sheet about the quantums, those rates. So the discussion was mainly about how do we structure now this upfront fee or facility fee such that it's to the benefit of Eskom. So that's what the discussions were all about, and they got very heated, especially between Andre and Mr. Rajiv Thomas. They would not accept some of the structuring proposals that we were coming with. I do mention in the statement that he mentioned to me at some point. In actual fact, he called me as he was driving to work to say, he called me by that name, to say, I'm being threatened here. I said, by who? He said, Rajiv. It was at that point that Mr. Rex Madida, whom personally I have not met for as much as I met Rajiv, because Rajiv, we used to interact quite regularly. It was at that point that Mr. Rex Madida came and told me that, look, the reason you won't be seeing much of Rajiv is that China decided to take him out of the transaction because of this consternation between him and Andre. So China will be dealing with us. So can you please intervene? So we spoke about that, and he invited me to speak to him outside about life, which I did not follow up on that. So, but I do mention, the other paragraphs, as you correctly say, Chair, was just to compare those fees with what we were used to, up to 16.3. 16.3.
Yes. And then you deal with the IDIVA issue because it also relates to the structure as it was brought to your attention by White and Case. Could you just briefly tell the chairperson what those concerns were and how that entity was going to relate to Eskom?
Yes, Chair. As I said when we were talking about the verification of the entities, that this is something that didn't happen upfront, it happened over time. And one of the reasons we had to dig deeper into the structure of the Warong Group, which included IDEVA, that did not have a direct line to the parent company, was the fact that this facility fee of about 400 million rands on signing or on whatever term signing and fulfillment of the CPs was going to be paid to this entity. So that gave rise to White and Case and the back end, the interaction, to try and dig deeper as to who they are. So as we're digging deeper, wanting financial information and everything that we could lay our hands on in terms of this entity, I was presented with a set of financial statements which were qualified, and I queried this to say, but we cannot deal with an entity like this. Then Rajiv provided me, soon after that, same financial statements for the same period with an unqualified or clean sort of audit opinion. So that is how this ADIVA came about, and that leads to the SAP process as well.
Yes, thank you. Maybe before we move to that, which is slightly new topic, Mr. Chairperson, I see the time now on my watch is 1 o'clock. I'm not sure that it will be convenient to adjourn for lunch.
We'll take the lunch adjournment and resume at 2. We adjourn.
Thank you.